Welcome to the historic Ocean House, a luxurious hotel that pays homage to New England's golden age of hospitality. With timeless elegance and renewed civility, this treasured resort is the setting for our special broadcast of the Ocean House Author Series. Each program features nationally best-selling and award-winning authors in a salon-style conversation, hosted by Ocean House owner, actress, and best-selling author Deborah Goodrich Royce. WCRI is pleased to partner with the Ocean House to present this ongoing series, which brings you the best and the brightest of the literary world. Now, let's take you to the Ocean House.
Victoria Christopher Murray is the New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of more than 30 novels, including The Personal Librarian, which was a Good Morning America book club pick, and it has been optioned by Al Roker Entertainment to become a miniseries, and The First Ladies, which was Target's 2023 Book of the Year, both of which she co-authored with her Marie Benedict. She is an NAACP Image Award winner for outstanding literary work for her novel Stand Your Ground, which was also a Library Journal Best Book of the Year. She holds an MBA from the NYU Stern School of Business. Welcome, Victoria. Yes. And this evening, Victoria will be in conversation with Deborah Goodrich Royce. Deborah's latest book, Reef Road, was a national bestseller and was named Best Books of 2023 by Kirkus Reviews, and it was an Indie Next pick by the American Booksellers Association. Her forthcoming book, Best Boy, comes out February 2026, and you can pre-order now. She began as an actress in All My Children and in multiple films before transitioning to the role of story editor at Miramax Films, developing Emma and early versions of Chicago and A Wrinkle in Time. Deborah holds a bachelor's degree and 2 honorary doctorates from both Lake Erie College and the University of Rhode Island. With her husband Chuck, Deborah restored the Aegon Theater, Ocean House Hotel, Deer Mountain Inn, United Theater, Martin House Books, and many other Main Street revitalization projects in Rhode Island and the Catskills, and she serves on multiple governing and advisory boards. Victoria and Deborah will now discuss Victoria's latest book, Harlem Rhapsody. After the discussion, we will open it up to questions from the audience. And without any further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Victoria Christopher Murray and Deborah Goodrich Royce.
That was grace under pressure.
That's
the way
right.
You very coolly,
just
for
came up.
Anybody listening on the radio, I had some sort of battery malfunction because I'm actually AI. My batteries.
Your batteries.
So thank you for that. Welcome back
Thank
to
you
Rhode
for having
Island.
me back. You know you're one of my favorite people.
Well,
so.
I feel the same about you. And I had the privilege of reading this book early, and I loved it so much for so many reasons. And we're going to talk about all of it. Has anybody read Harlem Rhapsody? And it's such a great title. And we need a book up here. We're missing our showcase book. No, well, someone will bring one up. We're not going to take yours.
We're not going to take yours. Thank you for
getting
offering,
ourselves
though.
together
there were
here.
like 15 people saying here.
While we are getting our props in order, why don't you begin by telling us, what is this book about?
So, well, first of all, thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for having me back. This is one of my favorite places to come. So I will come anytime you ask me to do that. But I like to say that Harlem Rhapsody, and you said a great title. Oh my God, we'll talk about how long it took us to come up with those 2 words. But Harlem Rhapsody is about a woman of firsts. She was the first young black woman to graduate from the Philadelphia High School for Girls. She was the first black woman to graduate from Cornell University, the first black woman to graduate Phi Beta Kappa. She was the first literary editor of the Crisis magazine. She was the first person to ever write a novel about the black middle class. And then she was the first person to discover every single Harlem Renaissance writer that you know. She discovered Countee Cullen when he was 16 years old, Langston Hughes when he was 17 years old, and afraid to go to dinner by himself, so he took his mother to meet her. Jean Toomer, she taught in school. Every single Harlem Renaissance writer that you know, Jessie Redmond Fawcett discovered them, mentored them, edited them, and she published them before anyone else. Amazing. Like, that is amazing that we would know them and not know her.
Let's talk a little bit about time. So the Harlem Renaissance, her life, all of this fruition of not only her as a woman, but this entire culture and art scene in Harlem. It was 60 years, not even, since the end of slavery in the United States of America. So we are here now in 2025. How many of you can remember 1965? Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem so long ago.
Not anymore. Like when I was 14 and you said 50 years ago, it sounded like
Right.
500 years. But where I sit now, it sounds like last Thursday.
Pretty much. So here we have, let's stick with her for a minute. How on earth did it happen in that short historic period of time that she was able to do all this?
I don't know. When I was researching her, seriously, I was looking at what she did in a day because she discovered all these people, mentored them, handled all of their personal situations. And she wrote, the Crisis magazine was the preeminent magazine for the NAACP at the time. She wrote in every single issue, every single one. And I kept thinking, this isn't fair. I get 24 hours a day. She gets 37. I mean, I can't figure out. And she was writing a book.
Yeah.
And she wrote more novels than anybody during the Harlem Renaissance. I don't know how she did it, except she just had such a love for literature and words that it consumed her, I believe.
Well, she certainly seems very driven, very possessed to go forward. So she works for, directly under, and for a man who has remained a legend to this day for so many reasons, W.E.B. Du Bois. She had a very complicated relationship with him. And I really love that you don't pull any punches, because I think life is complicated.
Yeah.
And I think probably every one of us in this room has had a tricky relationship at some point. And you don't sit in judgment, but you don't conceal it. Can you talk about their relationship?
Yeah, so I call it a situationship.
Very much so, yeah.
Because it started out where he was her mentor for about 14 years. And they never saw each other because remember the time. Remember we're talking about, this was 1903 when they met. So it wasn't like they could hop on a plane and see each other. So all of their communication was by mail. They had some telephone calls, but there weren't very many telephones even at that time. So he was her mentor. I always find it fascinating. There are no coincidences. And her father died January 3rd of 1903. 3 days before the end of that year, she reached out to W.E.B. Du Bois because she had just finished reading his book, and I have that letter. So I thought that was fascinating, the timing of it, and from that point forward, he was in her life. When I first found out about Jessie Redmond Fawcett, I did not know about their affair. And so when I discovered the affair, I was like, oh, shoot me now, because that's going to take away from everything she accomplished. And I thought about, can I write this book without including the affair? But I couldn't.
No.
Because the affair was so much a part of her, and she was a writer, and we're writers, and we know we write from our soul, and that was so much of her, so I had to include it. And then there was a little personal issue. She was a member of my sorority. And I really didn't want to I didn't find that out till I was about halfway through. And this is the truth. If I had known that ahead of time, I don't know if I would have written a book.
Right.
Because I wouldn't have wanted members of my sorority to be really upset with me. Although they all love the book, they had no problem with it. I was thinking, and I wouldn't have written a book, and she deserved to have her story told.
You know, it made me love her more. The tenderness and the brokenness of it. He was married. And he had definitely a daughter. How many children did he have? One daughter.
He had one daughter. His son had passed away.
Right, that's right. And it was very complicated with her mother, or her stepmom, right?
Yes, her stepmother.
Isabella Huff Fawcett.
Who needs her own book.
I would say. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the affair and how it impacted her relationships, Jessie's, with everyone else
Everybody.
around her. And then let's talk about Isabella a little bit. People didn't approve.
People. So there were two paths, I guess. There were people who didn't approve, rightly so. And then there were people who said everybody does it. And I wrote in the Personal Librarian, it was fascinating to me because in the Personal Librarian around the same time, Belle was having an affair. The book I'm working on now with Marie, the woman had a long time affair with a character who's in Harlem Rhapsody. And I refused to put it in there because I'm getting tired of these affairs. And so Marie was like, we really should put that in. No, we're not doing it anymore. No, we'll do that in the fourth book. But it's not in this book.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what that was about at that time. So there were people in their group that just didn't talk about it, but Jesse and W.E.B. were always together. Always together. Part of that was his wife didn't go out to those social and professional events. That's not what wives did. So Jesse could do that because she wasn't the wife, even though they kind of had like a parallel marriage.
They really did. I mean, they traveled together.
Yes.
They were, for years, a couple.
For years, for decades. And I think I found out about the affair through the Pulitzer Prize winning biography on W.E.B. Du Bois, written by David Levering Lewis. He's in his 80s now, and he's asked to do an event with me in Harlem, so I'm so excited about that. Isn't that great? He's in his 80s. But in his biography, Mr. Lewis said that Jesse and W.E.B. were star-crossed lovers. That's very specific, right? You could have just said they were lovers. You could have said they had an affair. But to say they were star-crossed lovers, the only time I've ever heard that term is in Romeo and Juliet, right? And so that gave me some context of their relationship. And he was the one who said they had a parallel marriage. Now, when I started the book, I didn't know what that meant. I could figure out star-crossed lovers, but the parallel marriage, like you got a wife at home, you can't have two. And they lived blocks away from each other. So I was like, how did that work? But I think what the parallel marriage was how they did everything together, and then the length of it. Like their relationship spanned 2 decades.
Right. I think, but I'd like to know what you think, was it a factor of being a time when people didn't really divorce the way they do now? Now people are kind of serially married.
Yes. That's totally what it was. I think that's why there were so many affairs. Men didn't leave their wives because women had no agency.
Right.
None. Like I think I was telling you earlier, we always think of the 1920s and we think of the fact that women couldn't vote. That was the least of our problems. We could not get an apartment lease. We couldn't have a mortgage. But the thing that bothers me the most, Deborah, we couldn't have a bank account. So I'm going out to work every day. And the money that I get has to be managed by my father, my brother, by some man. And I have nothing against people managing. I just want you to understand. But that was hard for me to understand. So a woman couldn't get a divorce. Where was she going to go? Back home to her father? She couldn't go get an apartment. And any single women who had apartments were looked down upon. They were thought of as being kept women because they knew that they couldn't have an apartment without somebody signing for them. So that's why Jessie lived with her mother because even though she was paying her way, her brother managed their money.
Right.
You couldn't live as a single woman. So men didn't leave their wives and wives didn't leave their husbands. And then I think just all these other relationships came on.
Right. So let's talk about her mother. She's a very interesting character. The relationship of the parents, the relationship of the whole family. Talk about
the mother.
Her family, the Fawcett's.
The Fawcett's. So Jessie's father became a widower when Jessie was, I don't think she was even 2 years old. Jessie has no memory of her biological mother. And he met a woman by the name of Isabella Huff. So, and first I should say, Jessie's father, who was a preacher, had 7 children, with Jessie being the youngest. And then he met a woman, Isabella Huff, who was a widow, and she had 3 children. And she was white, she was Jewish. And so they married at the end of the 1800s. And I remember thinking, as I was writing the book, why would a white woman with 3 children marry a black man with 7 children during the rise of Jim Crow, and why? First of all, you already have a baseball team with all the kids. And so, that's crazy. And I couldn't figure it out. My agent, and I needed to know who she was before I started writing the book. And my agent and I were trying to figure this out, couldn't figure it out. And something sent me to the census. I figured I was looking for her parents. So I wanted to know who were her parents. You could find out a lot about her. And when I went to the census, I found out that her first husband was black. Isabella Huff Fawcett was an integrationist. Has anybody heard that term before? I had never heard that term. They were first abolitionists. And when slavery ended, they became integrationists, believing that the only way you were going to get equality was through the complete integration of society. So Isabella Huff Fawcett was going to integrate America all by herself.
Wow, on her own.
On her own. She had 3 mixed children with her first husband, 3 mixed children with the next husband. She wasn't talking it, she believed it.
So 7 and 3 and 3.
7 and 3 and 3.
13
and
children.
She loved all of those children equally.
Yeah.
She loved all of those children equally.
Well, the way their relationship is portrayed, it's really a mother-daughter relationship.
Yeah. Because that's the only one excuse me, I'm a woman of a fantastic age. And so right now I'm being a little fantastic. Don't worry, in 2 minutes I'm gonna be so cold I'm gonna need to borrow a jacket. But yeah, and there's a lot of fantastic women in here.
Oh yeah.
So she never knew another mother, and Isabella came in, and one of the things I am convinced of, I don't have a lot of proof of this, I'm convinced that she used her privilege to give Jessie privilege. Like the Philadelphia High School for Girls had never had a black student. And I'm convinced it was Isabella Huff.
So her white mother marched her in.
Marched her in there. Then when Jessie, when she graduated valedictorian of that school, and there's a college, I can't remember the name of the college, that if you graduated valedictorian, you're supposed to be able to go to that college. Well, she shows up on the steps of that college, they see that she's black, and they said, no way, not under our watch. And I believe her mother said, that's okay, I have a better college for her to go to, and got her into Cornell. And I believe Jessie's drive came from her mother, who believed in her and who believed that she could do anything except be with this married man. But her mother supported her on I love that woman because she didn't just talk it, she walked it. Mm-hmm. Everything that she believed, she walked it. And I love that lady.
Do you know anything about her childhood or where she was from or how
New Jersey. I looked up because I'm still looking for her parents. And I never saw any connection with her parents. So I wonder if there was separation because of, the first time maybe they would forgive her for marrying a black man, but you're gonna do it twice? And then I'm sure when Jessie's father passed away, her parents were really scared. She's gonna go out there and do it again.
Have more children. Well, she might have aged out on all the children.
I think she may have aged out, but I'm not kidding. she would have never married a white man. Not because she believed something and she was going to live it.
Mm-hmm. And do you know anything about, like, you think about that movie Loving,
yes,
about the couple marrying in Virginia, and that was the 1950s.
Yeah.
And they met with active, not just, they met with hostility.
Oh, major. And I think it was like 1967 when that case was finally,
right.
You could have an integrated marriage in Virginia.
We'll take a short break and be back with the Ocean House Author Series here on WCRI.
Ocean House, located on the scenic Atlantic Ocean and historic Watch Hill, is one of only 14 triple five-star resorts in the world, with superb guest accommodations, a world-class spa, dining, and events. This year, Ocean House is once again hosting one of their most popular events, the Ocean House Author Series, with Deborah Goodrich Royce. Enjoy a discussion with beloved New York Times bestselling author Karen White on Wednesday, August 27th at 5 p.m. They will be discussing her latest captivating Southern drama, The Last Carolina Summer. Attendance includes a signed copy of the featured book, insightful conversations, as well as complimentary wine and delicious light bites. Held at the breathtaking Ocean House, this exciting event begins at 5 p.m. Wednesday, August 27th. For information and tickets, go to oceanhouseevents.com. That's oceanhouseevents.com.
And we're back with the Ocean House Author Series on WCRI.
So W.E.B. Du Bois, he obviously cared about her.
Yeah.
But he thought she was a brilliant editor.
Yes.
How supportive or not was he really, and I think this gets into really male-female dynamics.
Yeah.
How supportive was he really of her potential as a novelist, her career?
I think he was supportive of her career as a novelist. I think he was not supportive of her becoming the editor of the Crisis magazine. But I give this man a little bit of grace, because we're talking 50 years after emancipation, just 50 years.
Right.
Women weren't even allowed to take math classes in college. So a woman couldn't manage a checkbook. I don't know if couldn't manage a checkbook because a woman didn't have a bank account. So how could he see her running the business? One of the things, he was a complicated man, but one of the things that I noticed about him was when women went to fight for a certain right, he supported that. Mm-hmm. So when women were fighting to get the right to vote, he supported that. If women had started fighting to become CEOs of corporations, I think he would have supported that. But he couldn't see it. He'd never seen, women weren't working. Women didn't have those roles. So there are a lot of people who say that it wasn't fair that he didn't give her the editorship when she was doing everything, but he couldn't see it.
Right.
There was no way for him to see it. And how was she going to manage the money? And how was she going to have conversation with the vendors, which she actually did? And so I don't blame him. I give him some grace because of the time, because of when it was.
So let's talk about something like the Harlem Renaissance. I mean, there's a term that I love so much that I really hadn't even heard until recent years, this idea of genius clusters. Alison Pataki talks about it in Finding Margaret Fuller in Concord, Massachusetts, at that moment when you had Louisa May Alcott and Nathaniel Hawthorne and Thoreau and everybody else there. So there are times and places where there are these hotbeds of thought activity and artistic activity. What was it about that place, Harlem, at that time, that just
brought all of that together,
Yeah.
right? I think it was a couple of things, because it wasn't until I finished the book that I realized they were all geniuses in the
Right.
same place. I wasn't even thinking about that as I was writing. But there were a couple of things happening. This was the beginning of the Great Migration.
Mm-hmm.
So you had Black people from the South who were coming to migrating to the North for better opportunity, and so many of them had family in New York, or they had heard about New York. It was New York and Chicago, but a lot of them heard about New York. Then you had a lot of the Northern Blacks who had been free, and they were the ones who were educated. They were becoming educated. And the thing that was so interesting is that because of segregation, people always think segregation was only in the South. People called New York the Jim Crow of the North. New York was just as bad. So while white communities were separated financially, by economic status, Black people all had to live together. There were only a few neighborhoods where Black people could live. And so you had the Pullman porters and the seamstresses living next door to W.E.B. Du Bois, the most educated Black man in the country, living right next door to him. You had seamstresses living next to Jessie Redmond Fawcett, who was also very educated for that time with her master's and a degree from La Sorbonne. So they were all living there, and it was, talk about a melting pot, a mixture, gumbo. It was just all gumbo, all mixed together. And I think people fed off of each other. And I think they did realize at some point that they were living history. I think they realized what they were doing. W.E.B. talked about, and we talk about it a little bit in the book, about the talented 10. And what he was saying, think about it, 50 years after emancipation, half of the people who were alive had been enslaved. So less than 10% of Black people had graduated from high school, let alone had college degrees. And so W.E.B. Du Bois felt that any Black person who could get a college degree needed to go get a college degree. And then they were going to be the ones to save the race. And it was only going to be about 10%, the talented 10, who could do that and look back and save the race. And I think people rose to that. And so then that's where County Cullen and Langston Hughes and all the writers, they rose to that expectation, and they tried to do their best.
So in the book, some of the characters, real people, talk about who gets to write a Black story. Do white people get to write Black stories? Is it only Black people who can tell Black stories? This is a conversation that still goes on. You and I have talked about it. My next novel has Black characters. They're not point of view characters, but
very important to the story.
Crucial, vital. And I've thought about that long and hard, because I've thought, well, I can't write a book with just 15 middle-aged white women. How boring would that be? But let's talk about that conversation. Let's talk about it from the point of view of the people in the Harlem Renaissance, and then now.
It was really interesting because that was an interesting scene to me, where W.E.B. Du Bois didn't want to go to the very first play where a Black man was playing the role of a Black man.
Right.
Because before that point, it would be a white man in blackface. And he didn't want to go when everybody else in Harlem was celebrating this, including Jessie. And he didn't want to go because he said the words were still written by a white man. And Jessie said, we're going because this is progress. And our stories are still being told, maybe not as well, but there's a story of a Black man, and there's going to be a Black man playing. And it was such an interesting thing for me to write, because I was able to see both sides. I, of course, ended up on Jessie's side. That's why I gave her that voice. But I could see both sides to the story. And I could see W.E.B., because I had read some letters, and I understood his point of view too. I didn't agree with it, but I understood his point of view that nobody can tell a black story as well as a black person. But I saw Jesse's side in that if we only have it as black or white, we're never going to have progress. Progress is moving toward the perfection, not having the perfection.
Right, right.
And so we have to have the progress.
So talk a little bit, excuse me, without spoiling it. How does a genius cluster continue? What happens to the people? Why does it end? You know, eventually people disperse.
Yeah,
they go off
they
and do
got
different
older
things.
and they just went on, and they didn't do a good job of mentoring a younger group. I think Dorothy West, who wrote The Wedding, was like one of the youngest ones. But what happened to the Harlem Renaissance was the Great Depression. That's what happened to the Harlem Renaissance. Really think about that, because the Harlem Renaissance was like 1919 all the way through the 20s, and when Jessie wrote her first novel, There Is Confusion, before Jessie, you could count on one hand the number of books that had been written about black characters, and they were always slaves or servants, always. Then she wrote her book, There Is Confusion, which she's writing in the book, but the book is actually a book that you could get today. But when she wrote her book, There Is Confusion, over the next, I think it was 4 or 5 years, 40 books came out after hers, from Langston Hughes' Weary Blues to County Colors' book Color. All of these books came out, and so she really started the literary side of the Harlem Renaissance. So it was going and going and going, and then 1932 and the stock market crash. That's what really happened to the Harlem Renaissance.
And that, which makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and it was right in New York, and there was like something like 75% unemployment by black men during that time. So they had to all change their focus to something else.
I recently saw a photo of tents in Central Park.
Yeah.
And we don't even think of that.
Yeah.
People were
living on the streets, literally. And in those big cities, black unemployment in Philadelphia went as high as 90%. Like, I can't even imagine that.
No, it's hard. So I grew up in one of the endpoints of the Great Migration. I grew up in Detroit, which played out very differently. But it was a very real thing. The two roads I always say that led there, it was the Great Migration of blacks and the Hillbilly Highway of the whites. My father's family came from Tennessee, but absolutely, jobs. Yeah. I mean, Detroit, it was specifically jobs. Yeah. Henry Ford had the $5 day, I think.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about that, when you said the Hillbilly Highway, that sounds funny, except it was where the railroads went and where the highways went that determined the cities of the Great Migration. And so you had the train leading up the South on the East Coast, so people went to New York. And then there was one that went through the Midwest to Chicago and one west to LA. Yeah. That was it. And then the highways ended up in Detroit, and I think there was another part in the Midwest, and that's how people got to where they were going because of the infrastructure. We didn't have a great infrastructure at that point, and they took them to Detroit.
That is one of the stories of where you're sitting right now, Watch Hill, Rhode Island. There were many families who came here from Cincinnati and St. Louis. Anybody part of that migration originally? What I was told as a Michigan girl, I thought of people having, beautiful summer homes in northern Michigan, Harbor Springs, and they did go up there. But I was told around the time of the Civil War, there was not a lot of north-south railroad traffic, but there was east-west, so these people came here. And probably they wanted ocean rather than lake, but I was fascinated
Isn't that
by
fascinating?
that. Yeah.
The infrastructure decided where these people were able to go.
Absolutely. So before we go open to questions, Charlotte Osgood Mason. So she was a white patron of the arts, and she she really supported the burgeoning career of
That's
Langston
right.
Hughes and others. So talk about her and how complicated
Yeah.
the concept of patronage is to
Yeah.
an artist.
You know, it's so interesting, as you just said that, I was just thinking, everybody in this book had a complicated life. They really did, and we got to meet the legends before they were legends, you know, and it was really complicated in all their lives. And I'm a fiction reader. I love reading fiction, but one of the best nonfiction books I've ever read is called Miss Anne in Harlem, The White Women of the Black Renaissance. And that is the story of Charlotte and some of the other white women who were patrons of the Harlem Renaissance. Without them, we would not have Langston Hughes' first book. These were women who they were usually widows, always rich, and they did not want to sit home and play cards all day. They really felt the importance of, I think they could have been integrationists too, but they felt that in order for the country to move forward, we needed to build up Black art and mostly Black literature. And so they knew that the thing that would stop an artist from being able to be an artist is money. And that's true today. You know, you have to have another job or something. So Charlotte, who is probably the best known, she was Langston's and Zora's and several other people's patron. She gave them money so that they would never have to think about it, so they could just be artists. So for Langston Hughes, she gave him $1,500 a month. She paid for his apartment, bought him all these wonderful clothes. Think about it, $1,500.
It's astronomical.
Back in 1920, I'm looking for somebody who will do $1,500 today.
It would help, right?
You know, right?
I mean, that's a lot of money.
Especially since he didn't have expenses. You
Yeah.
know, because she paid for his apartment, but she didn't want him to have any concerns about money so that he could just focus on writing. So that was the wonderful part of her, but that always comes with a price.
Sure.
And so her thing was, she had some very interesting views. One of the reasons why she wanted to support Black art was because she felt Black people were closer to the earth.
Right.
I don't know what that means. And so that was a direct quote from her.
Right.
So I wanted to explore that because I was like, I'm Black. I don't know how close to the earth I am, but, and I wanted to know what she meant and I couldn't figure it out. So I have Langston in the book tell Jessie, you know, she wants me to write because she thinks I'm closer to the earth. And Jessie goes, what does that mean? And he says, I walk around barefoot. I don't know. And so she had views like that. And she and Langston had a bad breakup, a really bad breakup, where he ended up leaving New York and living in California for 2 years. But they had a bad breakup because she wanted him to write about Africa. And he was like, I ain't never been to Africa. I don't have anything to say about, and she wanted him to write about Africa and to love, she called it the motherland, and to love the motherland, and to write these rich stories. He's like, I can write about Harlem.
Right. And I wonder if going back in the history of that kind of patronage, you think about a family like the Medici family in Italy back in the, was it Florence or Milan? Where were they? Florence. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it ended badly with their...
It ends badly.
Yeah, their artists.
It starts out, and it was interesting because she wanted County Cullen, and County, who was a year younger than Langston, said, oh no, she's not gonna get me. There's always a price.
Right.
Always. He was one of the only ones during the Harlem Renaissance who didn't have a patron. Now, his father was very well off. He was one of the largest pastors in Harlem, and the head of the Harlem NAACP. So I think he was able to. Langston's father, that's a whole story in the book. Langston's father didn't want to have anything to do with him, and so he needed the money.
So before we open to questions, so the NAACP was nascent then, and W.E.B. Du Bois was definitely not only involved in the genesis of it, but really in getting it going and traveling around the U.S. and Europe and talk about the NAACP and what it represented and the promise of it at that time.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I love about this book is people tell me they learned so much history. And I didn't realize they were learning history. I was just putting in stuff I knew and all the things I discovered in research. And most people did not realize that the NAACP was started mostly by white people. And Mary White Ovington, the woman who's in there, I call her the mother of the NAACP because she was the one who was sitting in her kitchen saying, we've got to get rid of this lynching. We've got to. And so she brought together her friends and everything and WEB to form the NAACP. And the NAACP was put together by all these integrationists who wanted to just have equality with this country. Just to if we could get rid of all of these other issues, we will have a stronger, better, faster country. And there was so much hope in what they did, but they were also a little bit naive because I think they felt, a couple of organizations and a few meetings, we're going to change everything. And they bumped into walls time and time again. And they didn't believe, they were probably the first people who were like MLK. They believed in nonviolence, just standing back and times will change and people will get better. But they had such hope. They had such hope for what this country could be. And even though some people didn't like Mary White Ovington in the book, she really was an amazing woman. She really was. In the book I'm writing now, she happens to be in it, and she's much better.
What are you writing now?
So Marie and I are writing a new novel together. We've actually finished it. I'm working on edits now, which is like why I like reading better than writing right now.
Right now.
Because edits are horrible. Our book will be out next summer. We don't have a title yet. Can you believe it? We've written a whole book. And you think, you look at this and you see 2 words and it's perfect, right? It took us like 6 weeks. Like I was convinced I was going to be the first author to put out a book without a title. I was convinced I was going to be like, people are just going to call it, that book, the new book by Victoria Christopher Murray. Because we were going through all kinds of names over and over. And, it has to go through so many people. And people didn't like this one, and that one didn't like that one. And I was like, look, y'all just decide. But we came up with Harlem Rhapsody, and it's 2 words. And
beautiful.
It
it's
works,
a beautiful
right?
title. Yeah.
And it works, but it took so long to get there. I can write 300 pages. I can't come up with a 2-word title. But the book that Marie and I are now working on is about a black woman and a white woman and the mob.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
Yeah, there's some scenes I've written where my heart's beating fast, and I'm writing it. And I'm like, oh no.
Ooh, I can't wait.
Yeah.
We'll take a short break and be back with the Ocean House Author Series here on WCRI.
Ocean House, located on the scenic Atlantic Ocean and historic Watch Hill, is one of only 14 triple 5-star resorts in the world, with superb guest accommodations, a world-class spa, dining, and events. This year, Ocean House is once again hosting one of their most popular events, the Ocean House Author Series, with Deborah Goodrich Royce. Enjoy a discussion with beloved New York Times bestselling author Karen White on Wednesday, August 27th at 5 p.m. They will be discussing her latest captivating Southern drama, The Last Carolina Summer. Attendance includes a signed copy of the featured book, insightful conversations, as well as complimentary wine and delicious light bites. Held at the breathtaking Ocean House, this exciting event begins at 5 p.m. Wednesday, August 27th. For information and tickets, go to oceanhouseevents.com. That's oceanhouseevents.com.
we're back with the Ocean House Authors Series on WCRI.
All right, people. Questions. Wait for the mic to come because you're going to be on the radio. You know, I do hear, and I have to say hello to everybody who's listening to this. You'll be listening to it because I keep hearing from people who hear us on the radio and they just love it.
That's wonderful. Hi.
Hi. I spend most of my time in New York City, and I'm sure you've spent some time there too. And this past year has been an amazing time about Harlem. The Met had a huge exhibit about the Harlem Renaissance. Mm-hmm. The Morgan Library, I think thanks to your wonderful book, had the best exhibit they've had in about, I don't know, I think 10 years on Bell Green.
That was amazing.
And they extended it like 2 or 3 times. I know that I'm one of the curators there. And so given all of this and your inside knowledge about a lot of it, how do you think Harlem is doing now? And do you think there may be another Renaissance down the road? Or how do you feel about that?
That's interesting. That's a good question. When I was researching this book, I'm from New York, but I'd never lived in Harlem. But I moved to Harlem for 5 weeks because some of the buildings are still there, like Jesse's apartment building, the church is still there. The YMCA where Langston Hughes lived is still there, and the library, the 135th Street Library, is still there. It's called the Schomburg Research Center, which is the largest research library in the world for African American artifacts and information. So I moved to Harlem and I went to the Schomburg every day like it was my job. I guess it was, but I went there every day to study it. And this year, the Schomburg is celebrating its 100th anniversary. So Harlem is an interesting place because I've been all over the world and there's nothing like Harlem. It's like the streets pulse with their own stories. It's really interesting to me. But there's a lot of gentrification going on. But still, Harlem has maintained its personality. And there's no place like it. Now, in terms of another Renaissance, I don't know, but if there were, I don't think it would be contained to one place. I think because of the way we are now, through computers and digitally, and my assistant, I live in Washington, D.C., my assistant lives in Texas. You know, you don't have to be in the same place. I have a feeling it would take place all over the country. So I don't know, it may not look and feel the same just because of the way we live now. But I'd like to think maybe I'm going to start it with this new book here. Because everybody should know the name of Jessie Redmond Fawcett. It's crazy to me that we can know Langston Hughes and not know her. Mm-hmm. Crazy. Mm-hmm.
I was just actually curious, what was the runner-up title before Harlem Rhapsody?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the runner-up title was the title I thought we were going to go with, The Book Muse of Harlem. The Book Muse of Harlem. The Muse of Harlem would have been good, but they wanted the word book in there. They wanted the word Harlem. And so I think the Book Muse of Harlem. We had a million of them, but that was one that was a runner-up.
That one's beautiful. This one's beautiful, but that one's good.
That was that good? They were afraid the Muse thing would. And Marie came up with the Book Muse of Harlem.
It is good, but I like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what about the cover? You guys like the cover? Yes. Isn't that amazing? You want to know something? It was painted. They hired a painter. And they put his name on the back cover.
Did they give you the painting?
No.
Where is that painting?
No, he has it.
The paint. He owns it.
He owns it. And so his you can go to his website. They have the information on the inside back cover.
It's so beautiful.
Can you believe it? Like people ask me, is there anything else my publisher could have done? They did everything with this book. They did. I mean, you usually get stock photos, and they do a good job with them now with AI, but they hired a painter because they wanted a piece of art that would look like the Harlem Renaissance, but not take a piece from the
How
Harlem
lovely
Renaissance.
that they
Wasn't
did
that
that.
lovely?
Yeah,
Isn't that lovely?
that's a gift.
That was a major gift. And the color, and he looked up the colors, because when I first got this, I was like, orange and green. Like, who puts that together? Whoever put, have you ever, I was like, you have lost your mind. But then it stands out, right? Because well, you know what he did? He looked up the colors of the Harlem Renaissance. Like, who would have thought to do that? That's
And
why
then to do this kind of burgundy wine color on top of the orange.
Yeah.
I mean, I probably would have said, oh, try the green there, but that would have been too much. I like
Yeah, he did.
it's
And
very
it was
nice.
my agent who said, since we're not using the word book, to make sure that it has something in the picture with book, because the reason that they didn't like Harlem Rhapsody in the beginning was because people would think music.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so with the book, nobody has thought that.
Okay. Joan, did you have one? Yeah.
Do I just speak into this?
Yeah.
First of all, I read The Personal Librarian, and I loved it. It was great. I wanted to thank you for that. I have not read this one yet. Look forward to it. But I wanted to ask you, how do you the two ladies are obviously involved with books or literature in both Personal Librarian and this book as well. How do you pick who you're going to write about?
Yeah.
I mean, why did you pick these two ladies and to bring to, which I'm glad you brought them to light?
Yeah. So with Belle de Costa Green, it was Marie who discovered her. Marie and I didn't know each other before we wrote The Personal Librarian together. Marie had discovered, she's been writing books about women who've been lost in the folds of history for a while now. She kind of almost started the biographical novel genre. And so when she discovered Belle de Costa Green, not for political reasons, she just wanted to tell the full story. And so she wanted to write with a black writer, but she didn't know any black writers. And so she ended up reading decades passed really for her. And she ended up reading one of my novels, Stand Your Ground, and then she reached out to me. And that's how we got together, even though it took me a while to read the proposal because I was bored. The first page was about J.P. Morgan when I got it, and I was like, I do not care about J.P. Morgan. It's so funny, she sent me a proposal, 3 pages. I didn't know the backstory of her. And so when I got this proposal, my agent told me to just look at it. And I was like, why would she reach out to me to do a book? Like, she's writing all these important books. And the book I was working on at that moment was called Lust. And it was about to be on Lifetime TV. Like, I didn't understand what in the world would she want with me. And then I read I couldn't get past the first page because it was about J.P. Morgan. And it kept going back. My agent kept calling, are you going to read it? They want to know. They keep calling me. And I was like, oh, I'm busy. Finally, my agent said, 3 months had passed. And she said, nobody's that busy. It's 3 pages. Read it. And so I suffered through the first page. The second page got a little bit better. It was about Belle de Costa Green. But I didn't care. And then the third page, I'm not kidding, the last paragraph said, no one knew that Belle de Costa Green was black until she passed away. And I was like, are you kidding me? We could have saved 3 months and 3 pages if you had just started with that. And I ran to the phone because I almost blew the opportunity to work with Marie on this. Reading is fundamental. And all I needed to do was to read it. So that's how we got together, because she already knew that. How I chose Jessie was, when it was time for me to write a book on my own, I decided I wanted to focus on, there were 2 decades that interest me, the 20s and the 60s, probably for the same reasons. I get to write about the fashion and the slang and all the things that are different, and the rise of black pride in both of those times. And so I kind of bumped into the Harlem Renaissance when I looked into the 20s. And then I said, that's a perfect thing. I'm a writer. Let me write about the Harlem Renaissance. But I didn't know any women, so I Googled, that's not the way you do research, but I Googled women of the Harlem Renaissance. And Langston Hughes came up, County Cullen, and I was like, even Google's misogynist. I said women. But under Langston Hughes, it said Jessie Redmond Fawcett was the literary midwife of the Harlem Renaissance. Literary midwife. I was like, oh, that's interesting. What's that mean? Oh, somebody said that could have been a good title. So we thought about that, but then people thought giving birth. Yeah, so we did think about that. And then there was a podcast, a 25-minute podcast on Jessie Redmond Fawcett, and that's all I needed. I was like, how can we know all these other people and not know her? So you just go digging when you're looking for these people. Just go digging on what interests you, and I was blessed enough to bump into her.
Wow. We have time for one more question, and then you'll get to meet in the back. Rachel?
Hi.
Hi.
So I haven't read the book, but I'm going to guess it's got a plot and the pages turn, because I just get the sense that you're a writer who cares about her readers. How did you deal with the parts of the truth that weren't plot-worthy, or were there any?
Oh, that's a good question. These people, haven't you heard the term fact is more interesting than fiction? These people's lives were far more interesting. If we're going to choose to write about somebody, it's really, they have these interesting lives. And I'm not writing a cradle to the grave story. I just choose the time period that interests me the most. So this was 6 years of Jessie's life. There was stuff that I couldn't put in only because you weren't going to read a 700-page book. I didn't have I can't think of anything that I didn't want to put in. Everything else was in there, and I had to take it out. But it was only because it was 6 years, and it was an action-packed 6 years. She was discovering all these writers. She was writing all this stuff herself. And she was having an affair with W.E.B. Du Bois. I mean, what else? That was...
But as a reader, there's an arc to it. There's a definite arc. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but there's definitely an arc.
Yeah.
It's not just a string of...
Historical facts.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
No.
But her life was a story.
Yeah.
People tell me how much they adore this book and love this book, and I don't feel like I can take the credit. It was really her life.
Well, do you think, before we break, that there are just stories that need to come out? Like there's sort of, and I don't know if it's a 5-year, a 50-year, a 500-year. I think sometimes things just percolate up, and there's a long arm there's a long arm to justice, but there's a long arm to history. Too, and I just love that thought.
I do too. And it's so important for me now. In the beginning, I really was writing books that ended up on Lifetime TV. I really was. But now I want to write history. Mm-hmm. Now it is important. After I wrote this book, I realized that this was probably the book I was born to write. To set me on this path of writing about history now. Because as they try to bury my history, I'm going to excavate my history. And as they try to every time you ban one book, I'm going to figure out a way to write two. And so it just feels like this is what I'm supposed to do from now on. Because a history that's untold is a history that will always be erased. Mm-hmm. And I'm so grateful that Marie introduced this to me, and she's doing it, and other women are coming in and doing it, because we've got to keep history alive. I'm not going to let somebody else tell me my history is not important.
No.
I'm not.
No. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this special broadcast of the Ocean House Authors Series with Deborah Goodrich Royce. Please tune in each month as we'll bring you a new Ocean House Authors Series highlighting nationally best-selling and award-winning authors in a salon-style conversation. Hosted by Ocean House owner, actress, and best-selling author Deborah Goodrich Royce. The WCRI is pleased to be partnering with the Ocean House to bring you this ongoing series highlighting the best and the brightest of the literary world. Thank you once again for joining us. And in the words of Margaret Atwood, in the end, we all become stories.